And our main topic this week here on Mastering Dungeons, we are going to talk about the best from Storm King's Thunder. That's right. Our adventure review best of series continues. And Teos is holding up all of the awesome giant minis that he has in his collection. Wow. That's got to be, was that a frost giant or a cloud giant? I couldn't tell.
The cloud giant at the end there. Yeah. I think that's Sarissa. Countess Sensori is the one I lifted up.
Yep.
And she's also on the cover of Cloud Giant's Bargain, a spinoff.
Yeah. Oh, there you go. So today we will look at this 5e adventure, Storm King's Thunder. As a disclaimer, yes, we are aware that this adventure and the other adventures that we might talk about are not perfect.
What?
And in fact, yes, some of them we might not even like all that much. But this series that we are undergoing right now is about finding the best parts of these adventures and highlighting them so you as a game master can highlight them, or you as a game designer can take those lessons and put them into your own work. So with that in mind, we are going to put on our positive caps and we are going to look at Storm King's Thunder. Of course, we have spoilers coming your way. So if you don't want to know what happens in this adventure, Thank you for listening.
Yep.
We'll catch you next time.
Yep.
All right, Teos, lead us through a history of Storm King's Thunder.
This gorgeous book is the 5th primary storyline hardback adventure released for 5th edition, published in September of 2016, 10 years ago. Oh my goodness. It is also the 2nd adventure after Curse of Strahd, which you reviewed last week, created primarily by Wizards of the Coast D&D staff, right? So it was that part of that transition, though not entirely. And it's interesting because they got better about crediting people later, but contractors such as Will Doyle worked on maps and even the adventure itself, like that first intro sequence. The lead designer is Chris Perkins with work from Jenna Helland, Adam Lee, and Richard Witters, additional design by Mike Merles. But there is no external studio here. Like Curse of Strahd, it is for levels 1 to 10, which is 5 fewer levels than the first 3 adventures covered. So it's a little more narrow focus in terms of that level band. The credits page includes, very interestingly, sources of inspiration from various Forgotten Realms source books like Volo's Guide to the North and the Savage Frontier, Ray Winninger's Giantcraft, R.A. Salvatore's Legacy of the Crystal Shard, Dungeon Magazine articles by Will Doyle and Mike Selinker. Interestingly, they don't mention Against the Giants, the classic Giant series, but maybe because it's so obvious and ingrained in our designer brains that you don't even mention it. I don't know. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, it was interesting because that's the first adventure that I thought of, and maybe that will be an adventure that we talk about as an inspiration.
Ooh, that could be fun. I like that.
Yeah, that could be fun. So there was also an AL season, of course, a Neverwinter MMO expansion, and then a second one, a comic book series by IDW Publishing, and of course, miniatures, and later a board game from WizKids.
Yeah, they found a good way to reuse all those giant miniatures I've been holding up, and they put them on a map and tried to control the world and stuff. The adventure was number 21 in hardcover nonfiction on Publishers Weekly in September 2016. This is an adventure that comes out at a time where D&D is really rising, right? It's taking off. It's had those first the first year release, then the usual slump, and then suddenly this pickup that Mike Merles has talked about. And around now, it's doing things that D&D hasn't done before, right? Continuing to grow each year. The old products are still selling well. Everything's going great. This is also the year that D&D, I believe, shifted from Gen Con to Origins as its primary convention. I have this, rune inscribed ampersand glass that I'm holding up that was given out at Barley's, the brewing company across the street, through a partnership. And I think that's the oldest one I have. So I believe that was when we shifted. I remember stickers, special events at Origins. Treasure of a Broken Horde you had written for AL. You and I worked on the D&D Open, which had giants involved in it. And I think back then we were just told, like, hey, you got to put some giants in it. It was like the extent of the direction. Have giants in various places. Why? We'll tell you later. Okay. And then, then it became obvious. Yeah. So a really, interesting history where Storm King's Thunder comes in. And they work in this, I think they're still trying to work in this adventure to say, well, what if you started with the starter set, right? It's still early enough that they're really trying to ask themselves that. What if you got partway through one of our other adventures, but you want to switch to it? And so I think that's interesting too.
Yeah. And this was the second time now, starting with Curse of Strahd, where they said, what if you don't start at first level?
Mm-hmm.
With Curse of Strahd, they put the first level adventure in the back in an appendix. And we never really got into Death House last week. Although we certainly could have, because that was an interesting experiment that I think worked actually well, except it was so deadly in a certain spot.
Well named.
But it gave a way to send a free bit out to folks, because I think you could get Death House for free in certain places.
Yeah. And
so you could get a taste of it. And then if you didn't get it for free and you just bought the book, it was there if you wanted it. So it was an interesting experiment. And this time, this experiment was, you can start at 5th level if you want, but we're going to put the first level adventure and so on as chapter 1 instead. So I love seeing that evolution of, let's try this. How'd that work? Okay, let's try that. How'd that work? So on.
Yeah, and I try to keep all my NDA stuff nicely separated. And I have a note in my notes that say that it was publicly shared that the initial play testing, and my name's in here for being a play tester, so that part's public. But I believe it's been publicly stated that the beginning introduction did not exist originally. It originally started with those 3 towns that we'll talk about. And that was a modification based on playtest feedback to say, we really should have a sort of intro that you could play as first level characters, and not just assume that you're coming in from some other type of play. When it comes to this adventure, the premise and the approach, Chris Perkins said it was the Giant Craft book by Ray Winninger. Before he had jumped onto to lead the team, that had the old lore around an ordning. So Giant Craft is where it said, there's this structure of giant society, and the idea that at the bottom are the hill giants, right, and all of this, and what Chris said was sort of the big idea they had in looking at this was, what if that ordning was shattered? And that this required the giants to prove themselves, to go out and say, no, we should be the top of giant society. And if every giant is doing that, then, everybody, all the small folk, as they call them in this adventure, right? All the humanoids are scrambling as these giants just let themselves go loose in their manner of being across the land. And that impacts all of Faerun in this case.
Yeah, that is odd to me, because I could have sworn, without going back and looking, that the ordning, even if it wasn't mentioned, it was implied in first edition D&D.
Yeah.
And then I thought, maybe it wasn't, but maybe just the fact that creatures have hit dice and creatures have challenge ratings now make an ordning for you. Right? How can hill giants be at the top of the giant pecking order when a storm giant could just kill 10 of them at one time? So I love the concept. You sort of have to step back and put on the blinders of a role-playing game player, game master, designer to say, okay, this could happen. The hill giants might win. Why not?
Sure. Yes, it does seem strange. We've got numbers and we can eat a lot. Okay, sure. As part of this, there is definitely a redesign. You can see in the miniatures with how the giants. I'm holding a hill giant. They are huge miniatures. They are both in the size they take up in number of squares, but also in their stature. And the fire giants are sort of a little more back to the 4th edition than they started as, but not quite as far, with being swords covered in flames and things like that. The frost giants have more of a bluish green tint. So there are a number of changes to the designs of them that came across as part of this adventure, and also 5th edition itself. There is a lot that ties into Tyranny of Dragons, which is interesting because there were several other adventures in there that they completely ignore Curse of Strahd. There are some tiny touches of princes with some cult, elemental cult, but very a lot of influence here from Tyranny of Dragons in the story, and saying that giants and dragons have always been tied together with their battles that happened long, long ago in ancient times. And so the recent play for power that Tiamat did was something that woke up the giants. And all of this story happens because, in theory, the All-Father Amun looks down on what is happening with Tiamat and concludes, you giants aren't, being worthy enough, and shatters the Ordning. And this causes all of them to then vie for power. And that leads us to the premise. Mm-hmm.
So to be clear, just to get this out of the way, the god of the giants is Anum.
Anum, I think.
And we are going to say Amun over and over again, thanks to Keith Ammon of the Monsters Know What They're Doing.
Yep.
Anum. So I think we may need to just make Keith the honorary deity of all giants.
Yeah. Keith Ammon is the god of all giants. And the difference is, Keith knows what he's doing. Anum, the All-Father, clearly didn't know what he was doing, or worked in mysterious ways, let's say.
Clearly didn't. So, premise and approach we've talked about. There is a great deal of sandboxing moments in this, where you are able to choose, the players are able to choose, or you as the game master can help them choose options of where they want to go, what they want to do, how they want to tackle it. But then there are also other moments where it is definitely linear and pulls the story back and puts it back on the path toward its conclusion. Yeah. And the last thing I want to say is giants. Giants are cool.
Yes, they are.
If we did a poll of what are the best types of monsters or characters to face off against, I would put giants definitely near the top.
Yep.
They are easy to imagine, right? Mm-hmm. That movie playing in your head, it's hard not to be able to see a giant. They aren't overly complicated. Mm-hmm. So sometimes with undead creatures or fiends, there can be a lot of spells. There can be a lot of rules that they get in the way. Now, higher level giants like storm giants and cloud giants kind of have spells. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, giants are just big sacks of hit points that can also wail the bejeebers out of you. and it's just, I love giants as an enemy.
I love your Yelp review. I love it. Yeah, I love giants. During the 3rd edition era playing Living Greyhawk, I was in the Jeff area where the whole idea was the giants had taken over and we were winning it back. And it was an absolutely amazing campaign. And it was so fun to go against giants. And you always felt like every fight was an uphill battle because they're always above you, right? They always feel bigger and harder than you are because they're just standing over you physically. And there was always that sense of danger. Oh, this giant might be more than we can take on because they're already so big. It's a really fun opponent to have, and it's fun to role play. That idea of each giant being different, right? The frost, the fire, the stone, that does make it very cool and interesting without being so alien like, say, elementals. So it is a really great creature. Good point, Shawn.
Yeah. All right, so let's get to the introduction of this adventure. Let's talk specifically about this Ordning to kick us off. Mm-hmm. The Ordning is a semi-caste system for giants, with the most powerful being the storm giants and the lowest being the hill giants. So we have storm giants at the top and cloud giants. I'm waiting for Teos to hold it up. Then fire giants next. And Then we have the frost giants, and then stone giants, and then at the bottom of the pecking order are the hill giants. Each type of giant has its own mannerisms and also ways of determining leadership among their own kind, which is interesting. Right? The hill giants are mostly about power. They're mostly about how much do you have, whether it's food or land or people that fear you.
Yeah.
Stone giants are, yeah.
There's an amazing miniature of Chief Guh, who is quite large, sitting on their kind of bed of spoils that's described in the adventure. And the idea is that what they're pushing forward is the more that you eat, the bigger you are. And this is sort of the key to leadership, right? Having things by eating them and accumulating mass, and that's what's going on, which is wild.
Stone giants are a little bit more esoteric. They're more about shaping stone. They almost have a spiritual quality to them, and this sort of oneness with the earth. Frost giants are, from the frozen north. So it's a lot about survival, but it's also about sailing. A lot of the interactions that frost giants have with people, they're on the seas, so they're definitely this sort of mining, survival, icy thing. But they're also sort of a seafaring folk as well.
Very Viking type of concept that's being borrowed there. Yeah,
for sure. The fire giants aren't just about fire and destroying things. They are about creativity. They're about crafting, making not just items, but also magical fire items. The cloud giants are weird. Going all the way back to first edition, cloud giants were split equally in alignment between neutral good and neutral evil. So there was this idea of neutrality, but polar opposites in terms of their ethos. So they are also about magic, about power, about this sort of divination type of power that they bring.
Yeah, and then the storm, like collecting masks, right, and valuing beauty and art, and traveling their cloud castles, which is always very fun.
Yeah, and then the storm giants at the top of the heap, they sort of keep everyone together. They are the stewards of not just the giants, but of the lives around them. So they bring a lot of not just raw physical power, but also magical power to the realm of D&D, if you will.
Yeah, I sure will. Which is, again, fun, like super awesome to play with all these types. Very iconic, easy for a DM to understand these concepts and play with them and push them forward. And so all that shattering of the Ordning has caused these 6 types to go across the area, creating great upheaval. And the idea is that as the campaign progresses, first you start seeing that upheaval, and then you realize you can actually be the heroes to take it on. Also central to this story is the idea of King Hecaton, who is the most powerful storm giant, and what's going on in his court. And what's going on is he has 3 daughters, 2 are older, 1 younger. And borrowing from Shakespeare, his wife, who loves the small folk and likes to go visit them, she goes out to visit them and doesn't come back, and she is found dead. And so the concept is supposed to be, well, clearly the small folk killed her, and King Hecaton is super angry while trying to also honor her memory. And he has named his youngest daughter to be his heir, which puts her on the throne, being a little unprepared, while the 2 eldest, who he had through divinations revealed were not fit or as fit to be on the throne, Mirren and Nim, the eldest, they actually are the ones who have hatched this plot, and they have killed the mother to get him to leave court and go off and try to find what happened, which he does, and then he goes missing. And then their next move is now prepared to, with the youngest daughter being forced to be heir, they stand ready to fill in the moment she makes a bad move. But how did this all happen? Well, it all happened because this new storm giant came and hung out called Imrith, and she's actually an ancient blue dragon. And so she's causing it all to rot from within, and her aim is to take down all of giant kind and seize the artifact known as the Wormskull Throne, which is from another older set of underwater adventures, which is what King Hecaton sits on. She wants that artifact, and she wants to undermine all of giant kind. So she has caused all of this to happen in addition to that ordning. And all of this means that, Shawn, that like when we read the intro, it's a meaty intro, right? There's a lot going on here. But once it plays out at a very measured pace. It's just a lot to sort of take on early on, I think.
Right. And this is that age-old problem with adventure writing. This is a cool Shakespeare-worthy story, a la King Lear, right? Yeah. This is amazing, and I can't wait to read what. Wait, I'm not reading it; I'm playing it. How, as the game master, do I get the characters from the first letter of the first word of the first page of chapter 1 into this cool story that I'm reading? If you do it too fast, you have ruined the effect. Yep. If you do it too slow, or God forbid, not at all, then it doesn't matter what's going on because the players have never experienced it. So this is how we need to then work on our adventure structure to introduce themes, and then introduce NPCs, and then introduce plot elements that will get us there in the long run.
Yeah, and so that adventure structure, what it tries to do is provide an intro with the village of Nightstone that takes place after a giant attack. You don't know anything is happening, but you come across this and you see, whoa, giants did something here. Then you will get to get a choice really chosen by the DM of what quests they get, leading them to one of 3 towns to be in as giants attack. And this is where you can optionally start at 5th level, and the appendix gives us ties in if you're coming from Lost Mine of Foundelver or Tyranny of Princes or Abyss. Having seen now a giant attack happen in situ, you then travel the Savage North on various quests provided by people that were in that town. And there's a big section of that, as we'll talk about, where you wander the north. And this gives you an opportunity to see the Sword Coast and the Savage North and feel the Forgotten Realms, which is a fairly clever thing to do here in 2016, 2 years after the game's release. A friendly frost giant, Harshnag, will then lead you to a temple under the spine of the world to consult a divine oracle. Very cool thematic place. And this will lead you to say, okay, you must get this item, and the item that will get you so you can get to the Maelstrom where the storm giants are. The only way to do that is to get this magic conch that will take you there. So that is at one of these 5 giant lairs. And again, you pick which of the giant lairs to use, and you now will go to the Maelstrom. If that succeeds, you will track down King Hecaton, unravel the mystery to finally confront Imrith and defeat her. And that's a lot. That's not a small adventure structure, right? It's not a simple thing. It also means there is a lot of choice, but there are some pieces you don't use, right? You've got 5 cool giant lairs, and you're going to run one of them. You could choose to run the others later, but the story's done, and you'd just be kind of defeating weakening giants. But you only need to go to one of those. There are 3 starter towns, but only one of them that you will run, right? It's like that.
Yeah. And this is interesting because as I just said, this is a cool story. So you want to get the players involved. This would be, normally I'm not the person to skip levels 1 to 4. Mm-hmm. In this case, I would.
Yeah.
Because chapter 1 deals with this levels 1 to 4, finding out about the problem, going through and doing various things that we'll talk about. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't talk about the ordning. It talks about the giant attack, but it doesn't say why. Mm-hmm. I want, as soon as I possibly can, to get the characters understanding what's happening, understanding what's at stake, and for me to do so would be to get right into that fifth level adventure and get them on the right path quickly.
Yeah, and I think that's where, we've talked about one of the reasons for doing a positive series is that every one of these adventures has something that a DM can honestly say, this doesn't work for me. And someone else says, oh, it totally works for me because I love adding this to this adventure, right? And if you're the kind of DM who wants to add those little bits to reinforce the giants are showing up across the land, then you can create that really good ramp up to where it shows, yes, more and more giant things are happening. Something's going on. Oh, we need to find a clue. Oh, look, here's Harshnag. Now we can really go off and do it. I think, like you, would have preferred that adventure give me these things. And when I ran this, that was an issue for me and my players. But I've heard lots of awesome DMs really enjoy adding that to this, and then it becomes great. And the beginning, this Nightstone section, which is chapter 1, a great upheaval, can be a lot of fun, and it's illustrative of this, the way the adventure does these really interesting changes between wide open and then like you must do this thing. So it begins with you're on the road to Nightstone, and whatever your reason is, I want to sell a thing, or I heard there's adventure or whatever, and then you look at the skyline and realize, well, there's a chunk missing out of that tower, and wait, what's going on? And what has happened is, a few days ago, a cloud giant castle came by to get a huge chunk of obsidian that was in the center of Nightstone, which gave the town its name and fueled obelisk theories. And they took the cloud giant the cloud giant castle took this obelisk, and the humans, when this began to happen, ran. All the villagers ran to hide, and they went to these caves that were nearby. Well, they found these goblins who have been actually chased away from the forests by elves. And so the goblins capture them and go, wait, what? You ran out of your town? Giants? Well, we were giants. So they go check it out, find the giants are gone, and start looting the city. And that's when you arrive, is in the middle of this chaos, which is very fun. And there are a lot of fun moments as so you and various goblins are just exploring the town, and you run into them. There are goblins swinging from the knotted rope, hanging from the church bell because they love the sound, and doing it, constantly until you show up. There's a Zentarum spy there who's waiting for Zentarum because they want to take over the town. So one of the events is the arrival of these 7 snakes. And this creates a lot of neat kind of chaos, right? Like, how will it play out if you never run into the Zentarum spy, or if you run into them and kill her, Kella, or if you create an alliance with her because she's pretending to be a traveling monk? There is a lot of sandboxy here. But at some point, you must then go find the villagers, and you'll go to the caves. That also provides some freedom. Like, one of the likely things that happens is from a chimney, this lookout will see you. Well, the lookout doesn't like the goblin boss, so they'll probably come to you and say, hey, if you kill my boss and put me in charge, I'll let you go by. Really sort of interesting, right? A lot of what do you do's. And then you will, in theory, free the villagers from this goblin held caverns. They do things like yell Briark, which is fun, and nod to keep on the Borderlands. And they will give you then quests. And the quests are people who died in the Nightstone attack. Will you take this message to these people to let them know that so-and-so, passed away when the cloud giants, dropped boulders on us. And that will take you to either Bryn Shander, Goldenfields, or Tribor in the next section. But that's not all. We get a cloud giant showing up, Shawn.
Yeah. So the cloud giant arrives and helps the characters realize that something's going on with the giants. Let me take you. Let me help you. Let me help you. Help me. And I'm going to take you to the next place you want to go, which could be, as Teos said, Bryn Shander, the Golden Fields, or Tribor. Yeah. And so you get to choose, or the players may get to choose, depending on how you want to run it. There's a bit of a funny part here. A little bit of a railroad there. If you want to talk about that.
If the this is a quote out of the book. If the characters ask Zephyros, who's this cloud giant, to take them somewhere other than Bryn Shander, Goldenfields, or Tribor, Zephyros, eccentric wizard that he is, gets a little befuddled and ends up taking them to one of these places by accident. Nope, you're going to one of these three.
Whether you like it or not. Oh, look, how did I get here?
Yeah, that's a great example of this freedom versus not, right? That's there. Yeah. But what I do like about this piece is it does really nicely say, hey, not all giants, right? It does say, like, look, clearly cloud giants dropped, stones on this place when they were taking this artifact, but also here's this guy who's really nice, and he's like, yeah, I don't know what's going on with giant kind. Something's going on. There is a lack of information there, as you kind of spoke to previously. You don't get the full Ordning shattering story yet, but you get this sense of something going on, and you get a nice way to travel and then some encounters in the skies.
One of the things we didn't mention about the introduction is, like the previous adventures, they talk about the factions. Right? They talk about the Zentarum. This is the first time I felt like there is a bit of differentiation, not just in the philosophies of the groups, but of the actual play. I feel like for the first time, the Zentarum actually come off like, yeah, they're not great. They will stick a knife in your back if you get in the way of their plans.
Yeah.
And the Lord's Alliance right there, yeah, they do good things for the most part. But if you go against the wishes of their leaders, it will not end well for you.
Yeah, they'll send a strike team your way. Yeah, which is what happens in one of these events where literally a silver dragon comes in, dropping off 3 Lord Alliance dwarves to disable this cloud giant castle because they've just decided as policy, well, it looks like these giants are somehow attacking. We can't have this cloud giant city, shut it down. It's warfare time. And you have to persuade them, convince them, hey, don't disable literally how we're traveling from A to B. And you may or may not succeed at that. And you may have to fight off these Lord's Alliance dwarves who, I think it's great that they use dwarves. You just know they're just super stubborn. Like, no, we're here on this mission to, and they don't even attack you, right? They're like, I don't know who you are, adventurers. We're taking down this evil castle, right? Like,
And there is a new group here called the Kraken Society.
Yeah.
Which one of the tools of the enemies in this adventure is a Kraken.
Mm-hmm.
And so this Kraken Society sort of worships the Kraken and is trying to, awaken it and bring it back to its full power. So that is, it's given as a society that anyone might belong to. It's obviously an evil society at this point. But since you're going to be dealing with them possibly along the way, it's given as one of these factions from the start.
Yeah, it's fun. So you have maybe a couple of encounters in the skies. Howling Hatred members show up, and then you get to your choice of towns. And what's interesting here is you can have this feel, depending on how you play it as DM, that kind of like, well, that was a fun adventure. That was weird, but now we're just at this town to just do this little quest of telling people what that somebody passed away. And the DM has picked one of the 3 towns to be your quest area: Bryn Shander and Icewind Dale, Goldenfields, or Tribor. And depending on where you go, you're going to have very different and very fun giant attacks. I like all of these 3 immensely as fun experiences. Bryn Shander and Icewind Dale is attacked by frost giants and winter wolves. Goldenfields is a huge temple farm dedicated to Shantia and an Emerald Enclave stronghold. It's attacked by hill giants, bugbears, and ogres. Some of the ogres equipped with goblin huckers, and I should have brought that miniature because basically it's got like a hound on the back that is loaded with goblins and then a catapult strapped to their back, and they can catapult a goblin. I ran this one with my group, and it was super fun. Then Tribor is a crossroads merchant town led by Harper and happens to have a piece of an old dragon slaying construct named the Voningdod. So fire giants are seeking that, and you get fire giants, orogs, magmins, and orcs mounted on axe beaks that attack. And there's a neat mechanic here, Shawn, with NPCs that you get.
Yeah, you are asked to play a special NPC that comes with its own stat block or handout. And the point is to keep these NPCs alive. And if you can keep the NPC alive during during the battle and after, then you get a special quest from that NPC or because of that NPC.
Yeah, and this
when
is
that happens.
They break the fourth wall here, and there's actually box text that tells the player, hey, keep this dude alive and get a special quest. And I think that's actually kind of a right thing to do here, just to let them know they still get to play their character as well, but they are running the special NPC as well. And that's a fun little concept because and they're quirky, neat characters. Like one of them's a treant, like a young treant. And so there's some fun kind of concepts there. And then each of them has a story quest that will take you somewhere across the vast map of the North, which is, another interesting part of this adventure, that you are now going to, having survived a giant attack, right? Seen the remnants of one, survived one, you for sure know something's going on, right? And now we must travel to these various places based on these quests. But what's a little difficult here, and here's a art of the goblin hucker, which I love so much. But one thing that I struggled with in this adventure is that, my players all immediately wanted to solve the giant problem.
Yeah. Is that what you're looking at?
Well, that's great. And I was also wondering if they had a good map of the North here somewhere. But what I found was, So here's the map we were given. I'm holding up, but it's basically just an enormous area of land between Anorak and the Sea of Swords, from down past Daggerford to up to the Spine of the World and Icewind Dale. I mean, this is an enormous section, right? That's the core of a lot of Forgotten Realms play. And the idea is just start going on quests. And as you go, it's a little bit video game-ish, I think, in some ways. You go from one quest and you get to a town, and that town has a couple more quests, and you just keep going around and you level. Now, the right DM can have a blast with this, right? You could say it has aspects of old school play that are really good here. There is a lot of emergent play to be had, and these little quests that lead you from one another. And you get to really know the Forgotten Realms, which as a DM can be fantastic. So there is a lot that I like. But I wanted to solve a giant problem, probably because, as I said, in 3rd edition in Living Greyhawk, my whole region was the giants have taken over your area. Everything you do was about trying to solve that problem. And so it was a disconnect for me to not be able to solve the problem, instead go deliver like boxes of wine and some of the quests are great. If you befriended kept alive the treant guy, the awakened tree, it's an awakened tree, sends you to find the druid who created them in Shadowtop Cathedral, deep in a forest. And that's really neat and exciting. But also like, hey, shouldn't I be solving the problem with the giants?
To go back to what you said originally about breaking the fourth wall, right? This is another one of those tension between RPGs as storytelling engines versus games, where sometimes it is perfectly not just reasonable, but preferable to come out and say, this is, player, this is your task. Forget about inhabiting your character and what your character would do. This. And video games are another great way to help players understand storytelling because they are so ubiquitous, especially in the age of, since the original RPG video games came out, that people understand these quests. People understand that I need to do these things in order to become powerful enough to do the next thing. So you have to sort of know your group and balance it between them wanting to do, as Teos says, to do the thing that the adventure tells them they need to do versus do the thing that a game needs them to do. And understand how to the best of your ability, lead the characters of the players on the adventure that they want.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think that some of the DMs in our Discord server who really love Storm King's Thunder are exactly the kind of people that do that so well.
Yeah.
They know how to excite their players with these types of quests and make it really neat and keep it feeling relevant and interesting. And I've heard great stories by people who said, like, oh, we became like an anti-Zentarum campaign, or one of our group was really into the Zentarum, so it became about them versus the other person who was very Emerald Enclave. And so all these things can happen in ways that are just really fun. The other thing is, we talked about in Princes of the Apocalypse how this book, if you never run the adventure, is like the coolest source book on the Underdark. I wouldn't say Storm King's Thunder is the coolest glossography of the Forgotten Realms, but for this section of it, it does provide you with really interesting locations all across the north. We get descriptions, short to medium size, about places from Amphale to Zermorven Hall, quests that lead to these places, quests that come from these places, featured encounters that give you ties to the next chapter and help ground this chapter a bit. And so you just get and descriptions of the people of the north, the ragged nomads, deep coverage of all the tribes of the Uthgard, orcs, shield dwarves, elves, halflings, random wilderness encounters. And so this whole chapter 3, called The Savage Frontier, full of things you could pull and put into your own campaign.
It's important to remember that what was the adventure that happened in the 10 Towns?
New or old? Like Rime of the Frost Maiden?
No, the new one. The Rime of the Frost Maiden. That was still years away.
Yeah.
And Bryn Shander is a very popular Forgotten Realms area because of the fiction and also because of the video game.
Yeah.
And so some DMs were like, oh man, I wish I could adventure or get information on places in the north. Oh, here's Bryn Shander. This is amazing. Now we're going to get a much more detailed description of it later, but this wasn't the first taste of it that we got.
Yeah, and there's some just great. I mean, I had a lot of fun with the locations that I ran as we moved through this section. And so I think that if you're okay with the premise of this, you will have some really neat experiences in this section that will be very memorable. Will give you a feeling for what the Forgotten Realms is like, and very repeatable in that you can run this and one time you could go with the Bryn Shander and another one you could go with Tribor and end up on different quests, exploring different parts of the land, right? Get a completely different experience out of this. And when you go to a place fourth versus second, even if it's the same place in both campaigns you run, it'll be a different experience too, because the characters will be different, the types of things they'll be doing are different. And so all of that is really neat. And I can see why DMs who like this adventure a lot will go to it over and over again. Eventually, though, the fun must end. And for all that it gives you all these places you could visit, at some point you are of the right level. And the third and last featured encounter is Harshnag, a friendly frost giant hero who wants to journey to a temple with an oracle and ask it how to solve the problem of the giants fighting for power. Now, it's not that you never encounter giants in your travels, but they're sort of very focused experiences. This is where you kind of get back on the story wagon, right? Harshnag's kind of like, hey, this stuff that's going on, I don't like it, and I know how to do something about it. We get to this oracle, it'll give us these, it's an oracle for giant kind, it'll give us the answers, and you're like, oh, okay, take me along, here we go. And so once again, the adventure kind of pulls forward and you're going to go to chapter 4 in The Chosen Path.
And it's literally called The Chosen Path because that is the path that the characters must take. And so now we get the story, as Teos said, focusing back to let's get whether you have tried to keep it tight and story focused or whether you've gone far afield. Now you are about to take part in some tough traps and some tough fights. Yeah. With including some rolling boulders and archway runes and remoras and so much more.
Yeah, this is one where as a playtester, I think all my feedback was TPK from this, TPK from that. Did it change? No. It was a tough one. This is a tough adventure in various parts, and this is one of them. Really tough fights, and it's worth mentioning, that one of the ways people experience these, one of the reasons we love talking about these storyline adventures is they had these expressions through the greater community that everybody latched onto. Or even if you didn't run this, you might have known all about this either because it was such a big story and expressed itself in so many ways, the figures, the MMOs, all of this, comic books, but also, like Ack Inc. was doing this. And so one of the things that happens with Ack Inc., there was a really great scene where they come to this temple of the Allfather, and Perkins added to what's in this adventure a fight with frost giants on a frozen field where they basically had hockey pucks.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw a lot of DMs borrow that and put that here because it was such a neat idea, right? And so that expression that you often saw through the lens would then also show you what you can do to your campaign and change it up the way Chris did or someone else running this adventure, which is really neat. So you get into this temple and there's a giant ghost. One of the clever things is the giant ghost named Egeron that can rise and try to offer advice. Great, can act as the DM's voice. And he can give them a side quest as well because his father killed him. So, go off and do that. And that's fine. But then you also have the Oracle itself, which can provide a certain number of answers. It's almost like a speak with dead type scenario. And at some point, it will answer your logical question of what you got to do next with, I will give you the answer when you prove yourselves by gaining lost giant relics. And the more giant relics you deliver, the more paths I will give you to get this. It just so happens that Harshnag happens to have a map that shows the 9 spirit mounds where these relics can be found. And off you go. And a lot of this is Uthgard, who are watching over these spirit mounds. And so you go in there and have these adventures and claim these relics, and those can be very fun. Also, when you leave the first time, you find an airship of the Cult of the Dragon that is sort of here on behalf of the Red Dragon Cloth. And it's sort of this weird, like, we're bad guys, but we want to help you and take you around because we want to hurt the giants. So, get on board, and Ack Inc. did that. And it was very funny. And of course, this is how they got their airship, was taking care of all these cultists and making the airship theirs. We get travel rules, random aerial encounters for the airship, which is basically like a blimp with an elemental furnace, very Eberron meets Forgotten Realms. So you get enough relics, this results in being given a giant lord that you're going to defeat, which, as we said, has that conch that will take you to the Maelstrom. And when you kind of have the info that you need and you're ready to go, oh, look who shows up. It's Imrith in her blue dragon form, and Harshnag says, go, I'll stop her. And you run off as he is probably going to, certainly going to die defending, holding her off. And now you've got to go off and get this conch of teleportation.
And that leads us to chapters 5 through 9.
Yeah. Which
are all of the different layers of the different giants. So you have the Den of the Hill Giants, the Canyon of the Stone Giants, the Burg of the Frost Giants, the Forge of the Fire Giants, or the Castle of the Cloud Giants. And unlike in video game fashion, where you would need to take each one individually, this is really, you just need to do the one and get the conch at the end of whichever layer you decide, you as the game master decide where it will be located.
Yeah, this was a surprise when I began prepping it as DM, having grown up with Against the Giants, which maybe we'll talk about, there you go from one to the other. And that progress is sort of like the layers within layers, wheels within wheels type concept. But here you pick one. I picked Burg of the Frost Giants when I ran it. I've always had a thing for the Frost Giants. And so that one was easy to run in terms of easy pick for me, but it was hard. Like, you infiltrate Svardborg and take on all these giants. There's a neat kind of area that you're trying to explore, and the idea that as small folk you can sort of kind of go around, sure, until like, oh look, there's a white dragon in this place, or any number of frost giants that can beat you up. And giants, the thing about giants is they deal a lot of damage. And when they hit you, yeah, oh, it's lovely. Yeah, and so we're holding up maps here, but it's pretty neat, and there's a tie-in here with the frost giants are seeking the Ring of Winter, which we'll hear more about later, and yeah, there's very neat kind of this chained dragon and long ships and all this, so you get a really good feel of what the frost giants are like. There's some very tough fights here, and in the end, when you can take down the main giants, you get this conch, or you can escape with it somehow. But you're going to get this conch, and now you're done. You don't have to go to the Forge of the Fire Giants or any other locations if you wish. But they are neat. Like I remember the Stone Giant one had some really neat angles for that, like what you're talking about, the spirituality of them and what they create and how they think is neat. It's a very trippy type of chapter. The Fire Giants has some interesting, like I think the yak people that are there, and then I remember Chris Perkins running parts of that as well, and some really interesting forges and highly dangerous. So it's all a really fun experience that then leads to the next chapter, the Maelstrom and the hold of the Storm Giants.
Yeah, I mean, think about this as one layer that you're definitely going to use, and 4 layers that you're going to come back and want to use in some other game at some other time. Yeah. Right? It is content. Some people might say that's wasted space. And I say if you're a game master worth your salt, it is just more inspiration and more stuff that you get to plunder and use later. So, good on Wizards for trying this differently. That you don't need to play everything in this adventure.
I'm very split on it, to be honest. There's part of me that feels like, yeah, man, you sold me, I'm only going to use a fifth of this. I'm only going to use a third of this part. I'm only going to use a whatever percentage of these places around the map. But yeah, also they are cool things that you can pull out and use in other games. And sometimes I have borrowed from this adventure. So I'm split on it. I'm not sure. I recognize, we've asked people, we've polled people that, probably a little over 50% of DMs don't run adventure. They buy an adventure. They don't just run it. They take parts from it. And so in that sense, having adventures that are easy to pull pieces out of, it's great. And any of these layers is a super sweet thing to add to a campaign. Replace the conscious teleportation with whatever we want. So there is a lot good. I'm constantly arguing with myself over this, and I have no.
and what that shows is there are several audiences out there, and not everything will be for every audience.
Yeah.
And so we as designers, but also we as just people, need to understand that not everything. When you get something as complicated as a role-playing game ecosystem. You have to say, yep, not for me in this case. So if you are a person that needs to have everything in the book used, you can totally do that. You could have clues lead from one den to the next, to the next, to the next, and run it all. You don't have to, though. So, use it for that reason. And if it is something that does not please you as a consumer, then you don't need to buy it.
Yep. And there is a lot that you could sort of skip here. Like if you wanted to condense this adventure, you could take those parts out and make it a more linear thing, right? You don't have to even tell them that there are various options. You can just say the conscious teleportation is in the so-and-so layer and just go with that and view it as a short experience, because the truth is there is a lot here. This is a campaign you could run and play for years off of because there's so much here. But you're going to go to the Maelstrom, and Maelstrom is very interesting. And it's got these maps that Will Doyle and Stacey Allen worked on. What I recall from running this was getting TPK'd by a variety of giants who decided were probably not good. And boy, that was absolutely brutal. But there is a kind of dance here trying to do of sort of like infiltrate it, but then find the right moment when you can infiltrate and maybe gather some clues without getting caught as the thieves they think you are. Because if you think of classic media that we grew up with lots of like, Land of the Giants and stuff, you're trying to like, go around and grab things, right? The golden goose, any of those number of things. They think
fee fi fo fum, man. It doesn't get any more fairy tale adventure than that.
Yeah. And so, here you have to somehow like find the info and get around, but also not be accused of thievery and found to be thieves. And what's behind the scenes is Imrith in her cloud giant form is suggesting to everybody, oh, these people are assassins. They're probably in league, or the actual people who killed your dad, take them out. And we'll even try to manipulate the two sisters, of course, are in on it all. They're going to spoil things. So you got to do this. And she's ready to run whenever she can. But what you can do is negotiate with the various, there's a sort of alliance or council of various giants, members of each giant type that are there to talk about this ordning shattering and stuff. And so you can convince them that you're worth listening to, which helps with an already willing to listen to you younger daughter who's there on the throne. And so if you can get all these pieces working and find some clues, then you'll be granted information that'll lead you towards possibly chasing down King Hekaton. And the younger sister, yeah.
This goes back to actually the against the giants sort of thing, because it wasn't you're just going in to raid the giants steading or the palace. There's stuff going on in there that's politically intriguing, and that is captured here in this particular chapter.
Yeah. And so it's an interesting piece. It's a difficult piece. It's one that could definitely go off the rails when your party is unsure of how to strike that balance between stealth and diplomacy. And you've just finished murdering off some giants, and now you've got to be in a different path. And then the game kind of takes a little bit of a turn as well, and it becomes James Bond. Which I thought it was not something I expected until I thought, well, Chris Perkins, sure, he likes this kind of thing. So chapter 11, Caught in the Tentacles, is essentially a James Bond movie where you have to find your way to where the Kraken Society operatives have captured and are holding unconscious King Hekaton in these magical bonded chains. This is aboard a ship that is totally a spelljammer, a squid ship, called the Morkoth. And to get there, you must first take this clue that you have, this wooden token, which will lead you to another ship called the Grand Dame. And this has a gambling den called the Golden Goose Casino. I mean, this is any James Bond movie. Pao Ming is the Shu female mage who provides security, and she could either ally with you or not. She wants to join the Arcane Brotherhood and has an agenda. Doesn't really know her employer is evil, but could go either way on it. The employer, the owner of this ship, Lord Dryland, has this great art with a pet octopus. He will eventually admit, because he's not someone who can take on the heroes, that he is a member of the Kraken Society, and will reveal, Shawn's holding up that awesome art. I love that piece. So he will reveal where King Hekaton is and where the Morkoth can more or less be found. After sharing this, so James Bond gets a telepathic message from the Kraken that he's allied with and is killed. Just perfect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so the Morkoth is protected from scrying, but of course the PCs eventually find him, find it, and then they take the Spelljammer squid ship, finding that Hekaton is bound in chains that keep him unconscious. But if the chains are broken, then Hekaton can join the battle. Yeah. But in, again, grand James Bond fashion, while this all is going on, the Kraken may wake up, sink the ship, and now you have to escape the sinking ship, either during or after the battle.
And this is one of these funny things where it's like, I think Perkins or whoever was working on this part, it's like, it's a Spelljammer, so I can't let the PCs have it. So it will be sunk by a Kraken. And it tells you, like, no matter what, this ship is sinking. Yep. And there's some parts here that are just like, nope, this is happening. And so, your players must leave. Like, okay, fine. So now you've got King Hecaton, and he's back, and so you've sort of fixed everything except for the fact that there's this horrible Imrith who's out there, waiting to plot again. And so now it's revenge time, and we get to our last chapter, Doom of the Desert. And Shawn, this again surprised me. I did not expect what it does, just like I didn't expect NPCs for you to run in earlier chapters, or any number of surprises. There's another surprise here with what King Hecaton gives you, which includes he may come along, but also he gives these magic items.
A potion of giant size where you become huge for 24 hours if you're medium or smaller. And after that duration, your strength becomes 25. Your maximum hit points are doubled. Your reach is increased by 5 feet. So you become a giant. You get to walk in the shoes of giants, if you will. Everything you're carrying increases in size as well. So damage gets to be increased. And then, as the effect ends, your maximum hit points are reduced, but what you had become temporary hit points. So, it gives you this superpower upgrade. And it's
Sweet.
cool. It's like,
it is cool.
Yeah.
I mean, it's dialing it up to 11, right? Really fun. And Sarissa or Hecaton will give you the Claw of the Worm rune, which provides resistance to its bearer against dragon breath weapons. It can also protect a place, so it takes 8 hours to slow down a dragon, give it disadvantage on saving throws. It has a really strong thing where it can cause a dragon to gain vulnerability to all damage types on the end of the next turn. But you only get 3 shots at it, and it's a DC 15 con save. So, bit of a mixed thing there. So you're going to go to this cool desert amphitheater. Gargoyles with trebuchets will attack you as you come in. And then maybe you can go to Imrith into fighting down to a certain amount of her hit points outside in her dragon form. Or you may just go inside, and this temple has ties to Yuan Ti and Dendar the Night Serpent. So it isn't just like, her lair. Like, there's this history, and she followed these prophecies that are coming from the sleeping Dendar the Night Serpent. It's also neat how, Chris Perkins has this intentionality to him. You can see why he would often talk about wanting to be in film, right? Where a thing from the previous adventure actually works great in this one. And this thing sets things up for the next, right? We'll talk about Dendar the Night Serpent in Tomb of Annihilation, central figure to Cholt's history. And here it is, an adventure earlier showing up just as a sort of lore here, right? So this Yuan Ti temple, there are Yuan Ti who have given portents to Imrith, and they'll just chat with you and sort of say like, yeah, here's our latest portent, which the Imrith in her sort of ego assumes is all good, but she can't quite understand it, when really what it's saying is, this is the moment of your doom. And so you will face off Imrith. Her lair is neat. What she does is neat. It's a cool, very epic, cool fight. And if you win, the adventure says that Hecaton the king decides, this was all Keith Amon's test. Sorry. Anam, the Allfather's test. And the giant folk and small folk clearly are meant to form an alliance. That's what our god wanted along. Yeah. And so that's what he's going to do. It's very modern politics. And so, now the Ordning is back. Hecaton is back. The Sword Coast and Savage Frontier have all been saved,
And off we go into the appendices, where we get Appendix 1. How to link to earlier adventures, always good information if you are moving from one adventure to the next. We get a list of magic items, a list of new creatures, and a list of NPCs. So, all the good stuff that you need to write an adventure or run an adventure is right there, including Dawn Titans and Crag Cats.
Ooh, yeah. Some neat monsters. Neat to still see some of that FR lore get filled in from Drizzt novels and other places. Yeah, overall, it's a giant adventure, right? It is doing a lot. It accomplishes a lot, and certainly I think one of the stronger ones that 5th edition has had. Some very memorable moments there, and a memorable part of D&D's history. It happens at an important time for 5th edition, and I think did well within that time frame.
Yeah, carried forward this idea of seasons a bit. we get the season of the giants and all of the trappings that go with it. So
yeah, and it
giant runes.
I was just going to say the giant rune piece, continued to inspire. We saw a couple of years after this, like Unearthed Arcana come out with various rune casting classes, and that has continued to happen. It's just because that legacy is just so fun to play with, and the concepts are so fun to play with. So we keep seeing elements of this long after the adventure came out.
So, Teos, thank you for sharing your knowledge of Storm King's Thunder with us.
Same.
And thank you, everyone out there, for listening. If you are interested in becoming a patron of the show and you didn't catch the previous part of this adventure, we are close to a very important milestone in our Patreon. We are just a few dollars short of a very, very substantial milestone. And when we hit that milestone, we are going to do a little bit more work for you. We are going to start providing little bits of stuff that you can use in your game, whether it be magic items, monsters, stuff that you can take from us, not just from us talking and reviewing and answering questions and giving news, but actual game design stuff. So if you want to get in on some of that fun, hang in there, bear with us while we get our act together. But you can go to patreon.com/masteringdnd to support us. And we thank everyone who does that, whether you are a Master of Dungeon supporter, a Master of Realm supporter who get a shout out in our show notes, or a Master of the Multiverse who get named right now. Keith, Agile Monk of Fantasy Companion Workshop. Keith Keith Aman of The Monsters Know What They're Doing, different than Anam, the deity of the giants, the Allfather. Lou Anders of Lazy Wolf Studios, Craig Bailey, Rudy Chainsaw Basso, Dave Bastianson, Derek the Bearded GM, Steve Bissonette, Merrick Blackman, Bush John from Duality Press, Calvin Bridges of Alos, Robo Ballin, Kevin Criswell, That Inertia DM, Evil John, Evan at Nimbleco, Kevin Davis, Will Doyle, Andy Edmonds at Nerdronomicon.com, James Fisher, Scott Fitzgerald Gray at Insane Angel Studios, Ted and Guyana of Frog Helmet Games, Ben Heisler and Paige Laitman, Simon the Hunter, Sean Hurst, Hyperlexic, the Jaunty Mantis TTRPG Podcast, Mark and Mary's Gaming Compound, The Mighty Jerd, JR of the Twilight Perspective, JT Evans, Brian King, Jim Klingler, Gail Kiermandy, Chad Lynch, Paul Mata, The Mathemagician, Jaron from Mathis Arcanum, Eric Mengi, Anna B. Meyer of Fantasy Cartography, Trey McLemore, Michael, John Mickey, Sean Molly, Falcon Neal, Tom Nelson of the Deck of Player Safety, DT Norris of DT and Dragons, Phil Wirt from the Philadelphia Area Gaming Expo, Philip and Lindsay, Frog Prince at Tentacles Squelching Wetly, Post Fiction RPG Audio, Ricardo Who Might Adventure, Robert Pasley, Vladimir Prenner from Croatia, Joe Rosso, Ozymandias Rex, Runner Rick, Chance Russo at Drago Russo, Andy Shockney, Krishna Simos, Tim Smith, Spark from Dunner Games, Jeff Stevens at jeffstevensgames.com, Josh and Lee Wanika of the Tabletop Journeys podcast, Talos the Stormlord, Jeremy Talaman from Masters of Alchemy, Treves, Ryan Truk, Joe Tyler, Marcelo de Velasquez, the Valiant DM, Vidocles G, James Walton, Graham Ward, Jason Ward from Accidental Cyclops Games, Javier Waziak, Waterford Wizard, Chris Webster, and Z. Walt Winfrey. Thank you all so much for your support. If you get a chance, also help us out by giving us a review wherever you listen to the show. Give us those stars, give us those nice comments, or go to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/@masteringdungeons. Subscribe and like and comment and do all of those things. Teos, I know you're just coming off a wonderful vacation. So what are you up to on alphastream.org?
Ooh, two fun things. I released a video that was my last in a series on skills and skill checks and when to call for them and what they mean. And then the other thing is I've been, during my vacation nighttime, I was, of course, crunching numbers on all of the monsters released since the 2024 Monster Manual. 2025. And figuring out where the math has changed, how it's changed, how their monsters that are being made now from Wizards differ from the earlier ones. And so that'll spawn a couple of videos where I talk about that. And most importantly, a guide for how to make your monsters for D&D 2024, 5.5, whatever you want to call it. So that should be neat.
Awesome. You can find me on the socials at Sean Merwin. You can follow the podcast socials at Mastering D&D. You can also leave us comments, as I said before, on our YouTube channel. And just overall, check us out. So, Teos, we have survived the Storm King's Thunder. What are we going to do now?
Our follow-up adventure where you have to get into the belly of Chief Ga in miniature form and recover an artifact that by mistake they ate. I think that's next.
That's Hill Giant's intestines. That's a whole different adventure.
Oh.